Children have call it a fantasy, because it is, but they have the illusion of permanence in a nuclear family. And if the nuclear family is healthy and parents love each other and stay together forever, then that illusion of fantasy becomes reality. They believe in the permanence of romantic relationships and the formation of families. When that's broken, it's a trust that's broken forever.
I am very excited to have Dr. Erica Komisar on. She's a New York-based clinical social worker, psychoanalyst, and parenting coach. She's best known for her books, Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters, and Chicken Little, The Sky Isn't Falling, Raising Resilient Adolescents in the New Age of Anxiety. Dr. Komisar is highly recognizable and often debated voice in the parenting space, frequently appearing on major media networks and podcasts. Her focuses on childhood development, emotional security, and the psychological impacts of divorce. I listened to several of your podcasts and I said, I must connect with Dr. Komisar. So thank you very much for making time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to start off as the most basic in the background. Why you personally wanted to go into this work? What drove you to step into this field?
Well, I mean, I was a social worker, and I suppose I had my own journey to become a social worker. I tried a lot of things in my very early days after college and even in college, and found my way to social work, and knew I wanted to be a psychoanalyst, and was working in a clinic in Brooklyn and getting my licensing. And I was working with a lot of children who I was recognizing that if I was treating the children and I wasn't treating the parents or the foster parents or the grandparents or whoever was raising them, then nothing would happen. It's basically sending children back into their own environment. Okay. So I started doing workshops, parenting workshops, and they were very successful. And I really kind of found myself at that point and started doing them more broadly in companies and law firms and businesses. And so parent guidance sort of became a thing of mine at a very early stage. When I started my private practice, and that was about 36 years ago, I was noticing that more and more parents were coming to me with children at a very, very, very young age who were being labeled and medicated at a shockingly early age. And also children who were experiencing things like suicidal thoughts and depression and anxiety much, much too early. And so I was looking then at my practice as a laboratory and found that the parents who were the most present physically and emotionally were producing the healthiest children. And that seems like an obvious thing, but that was what I was seeing, that the children whose, particularly their primary attachment figure, their mother, if their mother was not present enough in their lives physically and emotionally, they were showing extreme signs and symptoms that you would call going into survival mode.
Okay.
Aggression, behavioral problems, attentional issues, anxiety. And so I started looking at the research, the neuroscience research, the epigenetics, the attachment research, which goes back to the 1960s. And I sort of found my field in a field called neuropsychobiology. And so the story really is that I would go around telling people at cocktail parties that I had discovered this thing in New York, of all places, where everybody was neglecting and ignoring their children and working really hard. And I was going around to cocktail parties telling everybody I discovered all this research, this body of research. And my husband said, you better write a book because you got to stop. We're going to lose all our friends. He's like, you just got to stop talking about it to people. So I went to the head of the NIMH, who was Tom Insel at the time. And I said, Tom, I've discovered this connection. I want to write a book about it, that mothers are really biologically necessary to children. He said, well, let me tell you something. You're going to come up against a lot of social heat. I can't be involved in that. I'm a man. I'm the head of this institution. But I agree with you. And I can give you a lot of cutting edge researchers that you can talk to directly. So
Okay.
then I called all of these researchers directly, and there was my book, the beginnings of Being There. And then it took me, many, many years to write Being There. But it's based on a tremendous amount of research. All my books rely on research. My newest book about divorce also relies heavily on research. So, I think that's my story.
Okay. That is great. That is great. Um, great advice by your husband. You don't want to lose friends, but it's. I'm glad you wrote a book because your works have been wonderful, and I am super interested. Uh, One of the main reasons I'm very interested is because I'm number one. I'm a parent. I have a young son with my wife, who's an incredible mother to our son. Um, Also, I was raised by a single mother, and I'm well aware now at 49 years old the impact of not having a father present.
Yeah.
So y- I don't know if they're necessarily hidden, but I know there are impacts uh, that happen with children that from divorced families. So can you just elaborate on that a little bit and educate our listeners on there are significant impacts?
Well, first, let me just say the impact of not having a father, because that's, it's interesting. Fathers and mothers are incredibly important. They're both important, but for different reasons. And so, a lot of the research today is showing that when you don't have a father, you're more inclined, little boys are more inclined to be dysregulated in terms of aggression and excitement, which means that they're probably hitting and biting and losing control in classrooms and at home, but they're also going to be more impulsive, more risk taking. And so fathers regulate those emotions where mothers help to regulate fear and sadness and distress. Fathers are regulating aggression and excitement, particularly if fathers are regulated themselves. But also, fathers, they create structure. So mothers tend to create less structure. And so little boys or little girls without fathers tend to have less structure because mothers
Mm,
aren't as good at creating discipline and structure, if you will.
mhm, mhm,
And fathers do a lot of what I call resilience building, which is that they take the emotional security, the attachment security of mothers, which is the foundation, and then they help to sort of seduce their children away from the mother a little and help with the separation process. So they help children to take risks and to, appropriate risks, to explore, to try new things, novelty, to build resilience.
mm,
And so fathers are important in so many ways that are different than mothers through this playful tactile stimulation that they do and the encouraging of risk taking in an appropriate way. They really promote separation. So children without fathers generally have a harder time separating from their mothers. So
okay.
there's this yin and this yang that happens with mothers and fathers.
Mhm.
And the children that don't have fathers tend to have a harder time separating from their mothers. So there's so many reasons why fathers are important. So I just wanted to add that it's not
Oh, no, that's
exactly
great.
the
No,
same
that's
thing.
great.
In terms of divorce, sometimes divorces alienate fathers, which we know is not a good thing. Sometimes divorces alienate mothers. We know that alienation is not a good thing for children, that it's very important that when you divorce, that you accept that although you may be divorcing your spouse, your child is not divorcing your spouse. And
Mhm,
so your child is stuck with your spouse as they are stuck with you for the
mhm.
rest of their lives.
Right.
So if you interfere with that connection, you are doing great damage to that child.
Mhm. Yeah, you talked many times about the importance of up until 3 years old, and there's different stages, are very important stages of life for the maturation of a child's brain,
Yeah.
and when the child has one parent and let's say the father's not there or the mother's not there, it can be incredibly challenging. What do you find? Is there a way that the divorce can happen? And what would you say is even, I think divorce in itself is what you're saying is that it's damaging, but how do you make it less damaging?
Well, so the reason that I wrote the Parent's Guide to Divorce, which is out now, is
Mhm.
because I had been part of as a therapist so many devastating divorces where the parents' pain had been inflicted on the children. Basically, parents leaked onto their children in terms of their pain.
Mhm.
We know that divorce is devastating to everyone. It's painful for parents. It's painful for children. It's not that you can take the pain away, but you can mitigate the damage that it does.
Okay.
And the way that you do that is you focus on and keep the children at the center of it, meaning you protect the children as much as possible from your pain. Now, that
Mhm.
means that as a parent, you have to have some place to go with your pain, right? You have to have therapists, extended family, good friends. But what you can't do is share your pain with your children.
Mhm.
And that's a hard thing because we're not our best self when we're in pain. I mean, I think you were a football player. I'm
Yeah.
guessing that when you got really hurt, you were not your best self. You get
No.
grumpy, you
Oh,
get,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
always use the analogy of stubbing your toe in your bedroom and you
Oh,
scream
yeah.
at your wife or you
Yeah.
scream at your husband and you say,
Right.
"Why'd you put the bed there? I can't believe you're all," like you're not rational and you're not your
Mhm.
best self. And that's stubbing your toe. Now somebody leaves you and there's always a feeling of being left or abandoned or rejected, and it leaves you in a state of brokenness. And when
Mhm.
parents feel broken, they tend to inadvertently, unconsciously, not intentionally break their children.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so how do you keep parents who feel broken from breaking their children?
Right.
That's what the book is about. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So we certainly have to pick up the book. While we have you here and we're picking your brain, it's, many times it's an old story. Parents, and I know I experienced it. The parents really take it out on each other, and the
Yeah.
child is in the middle, and he or she is used as a pawn. This can be incredibly damaging, and I don't think. I mean, it's certainly ways to work on this and work through it as when you're a young adult and you become an adult. But this is going to be damaging for life, of course, right?
Yeah. So there's a few. The reason that the book I think has a lot of important information is because I have a lot of adult patients who went through divorce,
Hmm.
like you're describing, who then reflect back on what did my parents do wrong, what did my parents do right,
Right, right.
and they talk about that in therapy. And so I would say I have a top hit list of the things that parents do wrong, which I can share with your audience if you'd like.
Oh, I would love that.
Um,
I would love
yeah.
that.
So, I mean, I suppose one of the biggest mistakes parents make is treating children like possessions. Children are not objects, they're not inanimate objects, they are not
Mhm.
possessions. Many great poets, Khalil Gibran being one of them, talked about the Torah, talks about how children are not your possessions, they are in your care. You are their guardians, but they are not yours. They are not possessions. So you cannot treat them like possessions and try to split them in half like a sandwich because
Mhm.
it doesn't work. That children at different developmental phases need different things in terms of guardianship and custody, and they cannot be part of some scheme where you say I get 25 hours and you get 25 hours. The idea is, what does that child need at that stage, right? So we know children under the age of 3 should not be taken away for overnights from a primary attachment figure, usually the mother, particularly if that baby is breastfeeding, sleeping with the mother. If that child, for the first 3 years, children use their primary attachment figure as their source of safety and security. And it is not until 3 years of age of that mother being pretty constantly there physically and emotionally that
Mhm.
child can internalize a sense of security that is the platform on which mental health is built later.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So when you start saying mine, the baby's mine, I want it just defies the imagination that it's the wrong thing to do. What you want to say is, what does this baby need to be healthy? How can I accommodate and make sacrifices in these years? How can I spend time with my child without ripping them out of the arms of a
Yeah.
breastfeeding mother? No matter what your feelings are about that mother, if you love that child, you do what's right for that child. You make the sacrifices necessary for that child. After the age of 3, you can begin things like overnights but I defy the idea, the modern narrative, the trope of 2 2 3. Do you know what 223
No,
is?
no.
223 has made more children miserable and mentally ill than any other circumstance. 223 is 2 nights at the mother's house, 2 nights at the father's house, 3 nights at the mother's house, 2 nights at the father's house, 2 nights at the mother's house, 3 nights at the father's house. Basically, the adults that I've seen and the children say, I'm treated like a sack of potatoes. And it destabilizes children, it overwhelms them, it stresses them out, and parents don't care as long as they get their half of the sandwich.
Yeah.
That is not how you share your children. Children need one stable home during the week when they are in school, where they rest their head every night, one stable custodial home, and another home on weekends. That's fine. And the parent who doesn't get them during the week can see them as much as possible during the week without disrupting the place that they live during the week.
Okay.
When they're really little, children do better when they're close to their attachment figure as their primary residence during the week. But as they get older, they may actually choose to spend more time. Let's say it's the father, with the father during the week and the mother on weekends. It can change, but not when they're little. So again, if you really pay attention to what that child needs as opposed to what you need, this is not about you as a grown-up. It's not about fairness. Divorces right now they're not fair. They're not fair to the adults. They're not fair to the children, and the children don't ask for them. So don't look for fairness. Look for sacrifice. Look for what makes sense for that child. If you do what's right for your child instead of what's right for you, your child will thank you later. Your child will be emotionally stable and mentally well. Whereas if you focus on you, you're most likely going to end up with a child who struggles.
Yeah.
So possessing is not is something that parents make mistakes with. The other thing is alienation, which we already talked about, right? When you badmouth the other parent to your child, what you're doing is you're creating a barrier to the relationship that child has with that other parent. And that's a big no-no because, again, you're damaging the connection that child has with the other parent. And there's lots of others. Don't use your child as a messenger to go back and forth. Don't promise your children things that you can't really fulfill. You know, promising is something that divorcing parents do a lot. Oh, of course we can have Thanksgiving all together. You know, you can say, look, we'll try, but I can't promise that because children take promises very, very seriously.
Yeah.
Don't bribe your children or use material things to win them over from the other parent. Don't compete with the other parent because all that does is damage your child, right? You think it's going to hurt the other parent who you're mad at. In the end, it only hurts your child. Many of the things in the book that I talk about will not necessarily hurt the other parent as much as they will hurt your child.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting you say that because when I think about this cycle, I'm thinking about the parent is doing something that they believe is going to hurt the other parent because they're angry because of the divorce, the way it happened, whatever the variables are.
Right.
Like I don't know if they're just purely not aware that that child, you're ripping apart the foundation for the child, which goes back to the parent who's trying to do the alienation, which is they have challenges and issues, ego, what have you, and they don't realize that they're basically just harming their child. Where do you think that comes from? Just pure ego and animosity?
So when somebody leaves you, it's a narcissistic wound. Even if you're a healthy person, when somebody leaves you, it damages you for a moment. If you're resilient, it's I don't want to say it's short term, but it is a narcissistic wound. It's a ding right in your ego. But if you're a healthy enough person with enough emotional security, you have the shock absorbers to be able to kind of contain that and not leak onto your children. But many, many people are walking around today very fragile themselves. And when they're left, when they feel, and even if you're the one who's doing the leaving, it doesn't matter whether you leave or are left. I mean, of course it matters because the person who's actually left feels more damaged. But the truth
Right.
is that even the person who leaves feels left, because in some way there's a dynamic that led up to that. So the person who did the leaving says, well, I left because you ignored me, or I
Mm-hmm.
left because you were having affairs, or I left because, I don't know, you were mean to me. So they feel left too. So everybody feels left and abandoned and
Mm-hmm.
narcissistically wounded, right? The key is to get help, because if you don't get enough help with that, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have some place to go with that hurt, with that pain, with that ding to your ego, if you don't have a good therapist, if you don't have a good support system, you end up oversharing your pain with your children. It's very common that parents will say, well, your father cheated on me with 100 women, or your mother, she was a witch and she did
Mm-hmm.
this, and and again, the idea that sharing that pain with your children means that that leaving of you damaged something so elemental, so fundamental in you as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
You need help. So self-awareness, as you were saying, aren't people aware they're doing this? And the answer is no. So generally, I will say generally that parents don't intentionally want to damage their children. They
Mm-hmm.
do it unintentionally and unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And in a world that doesn't talk about things like the unconscious anymore, because CBT therapy and DBT doesn't want to talk about the unconscious, but our unconscious rules us. And if we're not aware of what we feel very deeply inside, not on the surface, but very deeply, and what it's triggered in us from our childhood,
Mm-hmm.
from earlier traumas and losses and hurts. Because what happens with divorce is, in a fragile person, it opens up wounds from earlier losses,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether that loss was your parents' own divorce,
Yeah.
or abuse, or being left when you were little, or neglect, or a narcissistic parent. It could be something more nuanced, like having a parent there but they were not there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does is it opens up an old wound. And
Right.
so once opened, those parents cease to be functional as parents. And so the only way that they are going to pull themselves together, again, it may not be at all intentional. But what comes through is earlier trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
then the children have to share that with you.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I think I'm going to ask a question. I think we're going to get to the same place with the same result, and the question is going to be phrased two different ways. So the first one, you said, they shouldn't take their their arguments or their unhappiness out on the kid. They should
Yeah.
seek therapy, of course, or they don't seek therapy. They get no therapy. As you said, they don't believe they need help, and just the behavioral side and the mannerisms of a father not feeling confident in his ability to be a good provider. What I mean is going back at the mother and doing things to alienate. At some point, correct me if I'm wrong, the child is going to pick up on, oh my God, my father is like a horrible person. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that or not necessarily? I know it's a broad question, but
Well, meaning if a father doesn't support a child, will the child pick up on the nuance?
I mean that if the father of the
Yeah.
divorced couple, the father is constantly doing things to either
Yeah.
make life difficult for the mother,
Yeah.
alienate the mother,
Oh, yeah.
just make it unpleasant. Oh, and the child is aware of it. He's
Oh,
watching the
children
way
are
the
aware
father's
of everything.
behaving.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Children are aware of everything.
Mm,
They're aware of everything from the moment they're conscious. And
mm,
so that means infants are aware of everything. So this idea that, oh, the children didn't hear me, or oh, the children aren't picking up on. No, children understand much more than you do.
mm.
They're
Yeah.
much more emotionally attuned than you are. In the Torah, there's a story of how when we're born we have all the wisdom of the world, and an angel, yes, Jews do believe in angels, touch you right here, this little part of your lip right here, they touch you here, they give you this little crease here,
Mm,
and you forget it all, only to have to learn it again. But the concept is, when you're born, you're much closer to emotional wisdom than as you age.
wow. Wow.
And so the concept being that yes, children are aware of much more than adults are aware of. So they see everything. They're all knowing, all seeing, all hearing.
Okay.
You cannot hide from your children, which is, the other thing I want to say is, not everybody can afford therapy. Not everybody believes in therapy. Okay, so there's another solution, which is go to a pastoral counselor, go to your minister, go to your priest, go to your rabbi on a regular basis. Seek soothing. Seek soothing in your distress. If you can't afford therapy or can't find a therapist, seek a pastoral counselor. Seek someone who's going to comfort you, who's going to help you through this trauma. It is a trauma to divorce. So in my book, I talk about how, the old research with a woman named Judith Wallerstein was that all divorce is bad for children and all children are damaged from divorce. Now, the truth is that all children do suffer trauma from divorce, but you can mitigate a lot of that trauma if you divorce in a healthy way. The other thing that we know from the current research is that intractable conflict where parents hate each other and live together is far worse for children than if their parents divorce in a healthy and amicable way.
Could you go over that? Be a little bit more specific.
So it is far better for children to live in two different peaceful and harmonious homes where parents are amicably co-parenting than it is to live with two parents who hate each other and fight all the time with no resolution. So the thing is that conflict is part of living in a family. And in fact, you don't want to hide all conflict from your children. You want to be appropriate with the conflict. You want to be able to put your disagreements into words and then have what we call an arc of resolution. So they see you fight, but they also see you make up.
Okay.
The problem is not fighting for children. The problem is, obviously, the intensity and degree of fighting, as long as you're not screaming or hitting each other. But if you're disagreeing, that's not a problem for children, as long as they see the resolution and the compromise. In many families, there's no resolution, there's no compromise, and there's hostility. And when children have to live in intractable hostility, it's very, very bad for them, very stressful. And so, the research says that it's better for children not to live in that kind of hostile situation, chronically hostile situation. But having said that, none of the research says that divorce is good for children. We know that divorce itself is an adversity, is a trauma, and it can be mitigated if you do it well and amicably, and if you're your best self. But you can only be your best self if you are getting help. You cannot do it alone. You cannot divorce as an adult. If you want to be your best self for your children, you cannot go through it alone.
Understood. What would you say the probability is of a child taking on the characteristics of an adult if the father, I keep using the father because I'm a man, that's why I use the father, it could be father or mother, but a father not, behaving well, treating the mother poorly, or having low self-esteem, high ego. What's the probability that child takes on the personality and the habits of the father as he gets older?
Well, children need therapy too. They need therapy so they can sort things out, so they can be free to express feelings about their parents that they may not be able to tell each parent about. So in other words, if a child feels conflicted about telling a mother, well, I hate daddy because he says this to you and that, because he doesn't want to betray daddy. But he also doesn't want to talk about mommy because he doesn't want to betray mommy. So the idea of getting therapy for children is very important because it gives them a neutral place to go speak about their feelings about mommy and daddy. So they can sort through what are the good aspects of mommy and what are the bad aspects of mommy, what are the good aspects of daddy and what are the bad aspects of daddy. So they can integrate. So they don't have to love one and hate one, which is called splitting. So they can actually integrate the good and the bad of each, right? And ideally, as an amicable divorce, as a child-healthy divorce, that's what you want to do. As a parent who may not like the other parent, you have to try to remember what's good about that spouse, because at some point you liked that spouse. At some point you loved that spouse. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had children together. And you have to dig deep into your memory, your emotional memory, to come up with the good of that parent that
Mhm.
you can share with that child. And
Mhm.
it's really hard because if you're really angry at someone, you're not digging for the good, but you need to dig for the good because you need to help your child to accommodate to the fact that maybe daddy is an alcoholic and daddy does act emotionally dysregulated and erratic and is scary sometimes.
Mhm.
But daddy wasn't always this way. Daddy is also a kind man. Daddy is a vulnerable man. Daddy loves to play. You have to be able to help that child to integrate the good and the bad.
Mhm.
And when you're really angry at your other partner, your ex, it's very hard to do, but that's what's necessary for that child.
Mhm. Mhm. Understood. So, I mean, I know this is going to be a reoccurring theme, but the stability is hugely important. Uh,
Emotional
yeah.
security and stability is so much more important than fairness. It
Okay.
is the most important thing to focus on when it comes to a divorce.
Okay. So I have a scenario for you. So I was originally thinking as you were speaking and you kind
Yeah.
of debunked this, strengthened it, debunked it, like maybe splitting half the time with mom, splitting half the time with dad after a divorce. And by the way, for our listeners, I'm not getting a divorce at all. My excuse me, my wife is incredible. She's a gift and great mom, great wife. Let's just leave that there. Um, the child, is it at a certain age? I don't know. Is it 3, 5, 7, 8?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the child was with the father, then the child spends a little bit of time with the mother, but let's call it 70-30. Is it necessary to flip that and make sure it is 50-50? Like, I know you said the most important thing is stability and consistency and good structure for the child, what's most important for the child. But I'm talking in regards to roles of the father, roles of the mother. Don't we need to have a steady and somewhat 50-50 presence of the mother and father if there's no substance abuse, violence, aggression, drugs, any of those things?
Yeah. So there's a difference between spending time with your children and needing them to live under your roof.
Okay.
So, do children need to live under your roof, even though you may work very intensely because you have to get a nanny so you can possess them, so they can be under your roof because you that's your time. That's my time with my children. So the idea is, it's very common for parents to say, it's my time with my children, even if they're not there with their children, even if they have to put them in daycare. So I've dealt with cases where the father demands 50-50, but is working really hard. And it means that the baby then has to go into daycare under 3. Rather than be with the mother, who may only work part time or not at all, where that child would be much healthier. So, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. So, if you can be with your child, really physically and emotionally be with your child, that's when you should be with your child, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So, if you can spend lots of time with your child during the week. I always recommend if you're going to divorce or separate, live maybe not next door because that could create a few problems as you partner with other people, but live down the street.
Okay.
Live close enough to walk. My two grandmothers had houses that were around the corner from one another, and they did that intentionally. They were grandparents from different sides. One was my father's mother, one was my mother's mother.
Oh, wow.
They weren't competing, they were creating a situation where their grandchildren could walk back and forth. And it
It's great.
worked.
It's great.
Right. So the idea is have parents live in close proximity to one another, where children can go back and forth, but also where your home is down the block and you can come and you can go pick up your child at school like you did when you were married. You can go take them out to the park and play with them. You can go take them even for an early dinner or have them do homework at your apartment. But when it comes to going to sleep, they can go back to the bed that they're used to sleeping in.
Okay.
None of this, you mine. They have to sleep in my house, right? Because I think if you can sacrifice in those years, so you say what's better for that child is to have consistency, reliability, dependability, stability in terms of where they live. And then on the weekends, they're yours. On the weekends, you get them, you pick them up from school on Friday and you get them Saturday into
Right.
Sunday
Right.
morning. And so, I think the concept is separating weekends from weekdays is much easier in children's minds because it's already separated. In their minds, it's already a different thing. They're not doing homework on weekends. They're playing on weekends. They need that stability to be able to process what happens during the day at school. They need to come home to their primary attachment figure, whoever that is, and process that. But then can that other parent spend as much time as they want? I mean, I believe that fathers should be very involved in terms of spending time, but that's different than saying mine, mine, mine.
Okay. 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 It's very clear. Thank you so much.
So one of the best cases that I worked on, the healthiest, was a father who understood that his children were very attached to the mother, and he made the accommodation, and he said, I'm going to let them live with their mother during the week, and they'll come to me Friday through Sunday morning. And one of the children was not ready to go to his house on weekends. She was too little. She didn't want to go. And he said, that's okay. That's okay. You stay with your mommy until you're ready to come to me. And when you're ready, I'm here. I would love to have you come, but I'm not going to force you. That's a sensitive father. That's a father who wasn't possessing or trying to possess his children.
And why is that so important at such a young age? The skin on skin contact.
Because that's part of the cues of attachment security. So what makes children feel safe when they're really little and they don't feel safe is physical contact, is skin to skin contact, it's tone of voice, it's eye contact, it's the sound of your voice, but mostly it's touch, right? So the idea of skin to skin contact is so very affection. Even when children get older, lots of physical affection. That's how you connect with them. That's how you attach to them. And if they won't let you hug them and hold them, and what's interesting is as kids get older, and particularly when they get to be adolescent, they seem to not want too much physical contact. And so you sneak it in when you can. You do it side by side. You brush up against their arm in the car, or you walk with the dog together and you hold hands, what I call side by side. Contact with adolescents, because they can't make eye contact because they're trying to individuate, but yeah, you get it where you can. When you're watching a movie, you snuggle with them rather than sit on the other side of the couch. You sit right next to them. You get as much as you can from them, and you give them as much as you can.
Okay, great. So I have a thought or a philosophy on parenting, and I used to see. I actually had a great example of this growing up. Two people, a relationship, divorce. The husband remarries, the woman remarries, and the husband from the original marriage was very upset and did not want to be friendly with the new husband. Now, the new husband, as a child, I knew the new husband, and he was just a dynamo of a person, good person, caring, kind, thoughtful, not a macho, bravado person, but just a good, stable person. And I was thinking, even at a young age in my teens, wouldn't it be great if he had? So I didn't have a dad. He had two dads, and both those dads got along, and they were like, and I know it's a lot. It's saying a lot. It's a big ask, but they were some kind of friends, not best friends, but the stability in the most important part of the equation was the young boy, and he had two dads that got along. Wouldn't that be a positive thing? Is that a healthy thing? I'm very
I
curious.
think the word I would use is friendly, not friends,
Okay,
because I think it's a lot to expect,
of
men
course.
in particular. We're just animals, Mark, we're just animals.
Mhm.
Male lions don't want another male lion around their pride. And I think the truth is that it's not instinctually correct to be friends with the new mate of
Mhm.
your old mate,
Mhm.
but friendly,
Mhm.
civilized, that's
Respectful, right?
something, respect for without having to be friends, because
Okay.
friends, is a bridge too far for many people. But I think friendly, civilized, respectful. I think those are important things for kids to see. That there are
Mhm.
boundaries, yes, but
Mhm.
that you can get along enough so when you have to see each other at major milestones in that child's life, whether it's graduations or weddings, um, that you can be your best adult selves.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. You mentioned several times how the divorce itself, it can be somewhat forgiving and healthy, and somewhat
Mm-hmm.
healthy based on the way the two parents go about it.
Yeah.
Is Does divorce shape a child's belief on relationships as they move forward through life?
The
Meaning,
answer is
like,
yes.
it's
Yes.
hard to unbake that apple and say, "Hey, I believe in marriage. I didn't believe in marriage because I never saw a healthy marriage."
It's like saying, does somebody leaving you, does it break, if you're in a marriage and you are left by someone, does it break trust?
Mhm.
So children have a, call it a fantasy, because it is, but they have the illusion of permanence in a nuclear family.
Mhm.
And if the nuclear family is healthy and parents love each other and stay together forever, then that illusion of fantasy becomes reality. They
Mhm.
believe in the permanence of romantic relationships and the formation of families. When that's broken, it's a trust that's broken forever. It's a shattering of a glass that can't be pieced back together in their
Mhm.
minds.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it is traumatic when parents divorce. I'm not going to sugarcoat it,
Okay.
but it also, you can heal some of it. And I think it's all in the way that you manage it. It's all in the way that you handle it. If you handle it badly, it is a glass that shatters in a million pieces that cannot be repaired. If
Mhm.
you handle it well, it's more like breaking your favorite stoneware mug, which breaks in big pieces and you can piece it back together and glue it back together and even use it again.
Yeah. Okay.
So it really depends on how you handle it, whether they, one, trust you and your spouse again,
Mhm.
and whether they can trust in relationships, romantic relationships, and relationships that are meant to be permanent in the future. Of
Mhm.
course, we know that marital relationships, it's only an illusion of permanence, meaning when we marry, we make commitments to one another. I will love you forever till death to us part, and all of this, right? But we know that 50% of the population divorces. So we
Right.
know it's more of an illusion, but it's an illusion that's very important for children to be able to feel secure.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so when that's broken, it breaks trust. So what do they say? They say it takes a lifetime to build trust and a second to ruin it.
That's right. That's right. Um, Based off of that, we know that young boys and little girls mature at different rates.
Mhm.
Some are advanced, some are not advanced. Does it affect boys or girls more?
So boys are more neurologically fragile than girls. More boys are born in the world and more girls survive. And that has to do with the fact that boys are incredibly physically and neurologically fragile. It's one
Hmm.
of the reasons that boys have a harder time emotionally. They have more emotional problems in the early days. So boys are more neurologically fragile, meaning they're more likely to go into survival mode than girls if
Okay.
they feel under stress or under threat. And so that means they're more aggressive in school. They have more behavioral problems. They tend to have more attentional issues. You know what fight or flight is? It's the
Yeah.
evolutionary response to threat. So we say survival mode. Boys tend to go into survival mode more quickly and more intensely than girls.
Okay.
So it's not that girls don't, they do too, but boys
Mm.
are more fragile. And so, there's even a lot of research about stress in utero and how it may turn on genes for things like autism. And, the idea that cortisol in boys is not a good combination. Cortisol is the stress hormone, whereas oxytocin, the love hormone, in boys is a good combination.
Mhm.
But yes, so boys tend to have a harder time with stress and adversity than girls do.
Okay. Okay. Um, is there a high percentage of children who, and I never wrap my head around this, and I think because I'm watching something in real time, watching two parents not get along, maybe this is escaping accountability, but is there a high percentage of children that believe that or blame themselves for their parents' divorce?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, children are, there's something called magical thinking, which is that young children in particular, but all children tend to feel that they have more control than they do. And I suppose you could say it is a kind of survival instinct. They believe that there was a wonderful commercial for, I think it was Mercedes or maybe it was Lexus. I can't remember what it was. It's terrible. I should get my car manufacturer correct, but I think it was Mercedes. But it was there was a little boy with a Darth Vader outfit, and he's waving his, his force wand or whatever at the car, and his father's standing behind him with the remote control, and his father presses the remote control, smiles at the mother, and the boy's waving his wand, and it goes on. And the boy goes, "Oh my God," so that's magical thinking. I am in control. I have the power. I have the force. I am the force,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And that's quite healthy. That magical thinking, being the center of the universe, feeling like the center of the universe is very important for children. The downside of that is if something happens to your parents, somebody dies in a car crash, or a parent dies of cancer, or your parents divorce, you then feel as if you're responsible because again you have the force. So you outgrow magical thinking, but in a way, with younger children, when you divorce, they do tend to go right to that place and believe that they're responsible. So one of the things that you always have to do is disavow children. Two things you have to do when you tell them you're getting divorced. One is to say that sometimes grown-ups fall out of love with one another, but they never ever fall out of love with their children.
Mhm.
That is permanent. And the fact that you are never responsible, you have never been, you never will be responsible for what has happened between your father and I, or your mother and I.
Mhm. So, along those lines, how should parents deliver the information to children that they're getting a divorce?
Together, if possible, calmly, not on a birthday or a holiday or something, or Christmas or something that they will forever have an anniversary and associated with that.
Mhm.
Something where you have time to process it as a family, so
Right,
it's not like wham bam and I'm out of here.
right.
Do it in such a way that you talk about we are getting a divorce because we are not. Sometimes grown-ups fall out of love with one another and do better raising their children in separate homes, and that's the idea, is that you keep it on the we, the Queen's Royal we do this, we did, but not your father did this or your mother did this, or definitely keep it together and talk about match. That sometimes people marry and they're in love and they believe they're a good match, and they realize over time that they're not as good a match as you need to be to stay together forever.
Mhm.
You talk about it in those terms, and that way no one is culpable, no one is responsible, no one is to blame. Everyone's to blame, but no one's to blame, and certainly not the children are to
Okay.
blame. And it's very important to say you are not to blame. This has nothing to do with you. It's purely between your parents, and and we'll always love you. Parents never ever fall out of love with their children.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. We talked about the attachment, secure attachment experience, and what that looks like. Could you break that down for our listeners?
So attachment security is a feeling of safety and a feeling of so we I think you probably talk about like core training, and you talk about health stuff, right? And core
Yes.
training. So
Yes.
say that it's the core of you emotionally. So, we do core training, which is physical training to make sure we're physically strong. And attachment security is core training for one's emotional center. And the way that you do that is that you have the skin to skin contact and the physical and emotional presence of the primary attachment figure as much as possible in the first 3 years to soothe the baby when they're in distress from moment to moment. Every time a mother soothes a baby who is in distress from moment to moment, she is actually regulating their emotions. She's serving a biological function. She's raising cortisol, which is the love hormone, which is inversely connected to oxytocin. She's raising oxytocin and lowering cortisol. So oxytocin is the love hormone, and she's lowering cortisol, the stress hormone. So through this physical and emotional attunement, she is actually raising a sense of safety in that child and reducing stress and physical contact. So there was a researcher that I interviewed for my book who said that babies in other parts of the world don't cry like babies in the Western world, because babies in the Western world cry a lot because we have all these perverse ideas about independence and separating them from our bodies at an early age and putting them in cribs and daycare and sleep training. And she said they cry a lot because they're in distress a lot and they have very high cortisol levels. And babies in the other parts of the world that are worn on their mother's bodies for a full year, first on the front and then on the back, don't cry because they don't need to cry.
Wow. So interesting.
Babies are not meant to. So I suppose you could say that babies are like marsupials. They're meant to stay very close to their mother's bodies for the first year and then very close to their mother's bodies in a different way for the next 2 years. While they're exploring the world, they need to be able to come back and emotionally refuel and explore and refuel. And so that first 3 years is the period in which they're forming that foundation, that sense of security, that sense of trust, that when I need my mommy, she'll be there.
Right.
When I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling scared, when I'm feeling mad, my mommy's going to be there. It's that sense of safety and security and emotional regulation that prepares a child later on to be able to cope with adversity and stress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are children do they inherit an aggressive gene? Is that taught? Is that something they have to have innate? I'll give you an example. I'm in Miami. There's a lot of young children taking wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Some kids absolutely love it. Other kids are like, I do not want to go out on that mat. Do they inherit that aggressive feeling?
That's a personality. Children are constitutionally born more aggressive and less aggressive. That is one of the constitutional aspects of personality. So I suppose you could say like 20% of personality is constitution and 80% is environment. So the nature nurture kind of thing. How much aggression you have, you can go into a hospital and you'll see some babies from birth are very quiet and contemplative and will look at a light and suck their thumb. Other babies are screaming their lungs out, pick me up, I'm terrified. And so those babies have a lot more aggression than the baby who sits there sucking their thumb and looking at the light. So we know that babies differ in terms of their levels of aggression from a very young age. Also, it depends on how their fathers or mothers play with them. Meaning, some children are used to having kind of fathers who roughhouse with them and tickle them and play with them physically. And so they're more used to physical play, and they're also more used to feeling safe while doing physical play. Other kids, particularly little boys and little girls who don't have fathers, have not been played with that way, or some have fathers who aren't physical. I mean, it's funny because I was talking to a patient about how important it is to do roughhousing, appropriate, like tickling and wrestling and with your kids. And they said, well, I don't like to do, I don't like to do that. And I don't like ball sports. I don't like sports. And I said, well, you know what? Fake it till you make it. I said, unless you have somebody like a grandfather or an uncle who can
Right,
do it,
right,
but
right.
you're the biggest influence on that child, and fake it till you make it, and
Yeah.
get out there and kick that ball, and
Hmm.
learn to tickle, and because it's really important for your child.
Right, right.
So I hear you. It doesn't come naturally to you, but there's a lot of things that don't come naturally, like not sleeping all night when you have a very, very young baby, that you
Hmm.
have to accommodate to. But it's what really is needed for children to feel safe while also playing a little bit physically.
Okay. Okay. Transitioning into the care of children, and I heard you mention previously about daycare, but I was thinking, being in Miami and really anywhere, but I know a lot in Miami because I hear it, nannies. So the
Mm-hmm.
challenges of daycare, the challenges of nannies, that having someone watch your child is one thing. Having someone watch your child that's a has a PhD in child psychology. I mean, I don't know, and it's not your parents, but I could see why that wouldn't be terrible. But I was very curious about the drawbacks of daycare and the drawbacks of having a nanny or a live-in nanny.
So
And
it's a
some people, I'm sorry,
complicated question.
I'm sorry to
Yeah, it's
interrupt.
a complicated. I prefer nannies to daycare
Okay.
because, I mean, in order of appearance, your primary attachment figure when you're little is best. If you can't have that person, then the other parent, who's your non primary attachment figure parent. After that, family members, what we call kinship bonds, a grandmother, an aunt, someone with a more similar investment in you emotionally that's going to be in your life forever. After that, it could be extended family too. After that, a nanny, single surrogate caregiver, a nanny who you are going to keep in that child's life for 18 years.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
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 After that, if you can't afford that, sharing care with another family for one nanny,
Hmm.
sharing a nanny with another family. That nanny is going to be more consistent, is going to watch the children in your home and in your friend's home, and that will be more familiar to your child and better for your child, and will keep the ratios down of caregiver to child. But nannies, the problem with nannies, with particularly with wealthy families, is that they tend to spend more time with children than parents do. And what that means is that those children are going to find more comfort from those nannies and attach to those nannies in a way that they don't attach to their parents. And when the parents get a whiff of that, particularly the mothers, they become competitive and jealous
Hmm.
and end up firing the nannies for some small infraction that has nothing to do with anything. Because and then the child is forlorn because then the child goes through a series of nannies who they get attached to and lose, and eventually they just stop attaching to people. And that's
Hmm.
a very common narrative, which is that mothers have to realize when they give up that role of nurturing their children, that child has to attach to somebody in a surrogate way. And often that means that when the parent comes home from a long day's work, that child will turn more to the nanny than they will to the mother.
Hmm.
And although that may sound like, well, I mean, the mother has to accept that she has forsaken, given up that privileged role of being that child's center of the universe.
Hmm.
And the problem too is that the nanny goes home, and the nanny will eventually permanently go home.
Hmm.
And so there's loss involved in a nanny, right?
Okay.
So hiring a nanny is like we say hiring a nanny is like buying a Great Dane. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes, they do. Their years are limited and they die young.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
And so I always think, why do people buy Great Danes?
I know.
They live like 6 years. I mean,
Well,
something, I don't know, a little
so
more than
sad.
that.
Yeah.
But they're going to lose them every time. I always buy Golden Doodles. They live till 17 or 18.
Yeah.
So the idea is, if you are going to bring a nanny on the scene, then you have to recognize that if you are going to spend long hours away and that nanny is going to spend more hours soothing your child is going to get very attached to that nanny, and you have to be able to be okay with that.
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
you also have to be willing to keep that nanny on for as long as you can. More like having a golden doodle or an Australian shepherd than getting
Right.
a Great Dane. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there uh, the first question, is there an age that is the most significant? And I know I asked something similar earlier of developmental, like they're going to hold on to all of these behaviors or beliefs or values. Is there an age bracket that is the most impressionable?
Well, that's a very good question because everybody is talking about values today
Hmm.
and differences in values, and the country is split in differences in values. You cannot expect your children to learn your belief system, your value system, if you're not around. You cannot delegate teaching your children your values to other people. So parents will come home and say, I didn't like the way that nanny fed my child this or did this or that. I'm like, if you're not there, you cannot teach your children those values. The values have to come from you, but to communicate those values, you need to be around.
Hmm.
That is just the inconvenient truth. Your children will not learn your belief system or your values if you are not around to teach them. You cannot delegate that to someone else. You
Okay.
cannot delegate it to a nanny. You cannot delegate it to a teacher. You cannot delegate it to a minister. It's got to be you.
Okay. Okay. And then this is very similar. Someone said, it doesn't really matter where your children are. They're going to learn everything from you at home based off what you just said. I mean, if I'm working all day and then I come home and I get to spend 2, 3 hours with my son, but all day he's in a challenged environment in the culture where he goes to school or whatever it is not giving him a great foundation or teaching him wonderful things. I think the time that I'm with him is not enough.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Should fathers be more present? And the answer is, of course, parents should be more present. But you would hope that you're a team with your wife, right? So
Mhm.
we are a team. And I think this has really gotten lost with all this competitiveness between men and women. Men and women don't think of themselves as complementing each other and sort of working as a team. They think of each other as competition. How much are you making? How much are you making? How much are you cleaning the kitchen? How much are you cleaning the kitchen? It's all a competition, right? How
Right.
much do you do housework? How much do you take care of the children? How much money do you make? So if we take the competition off the table and go back to a collaborative approach and say, we're a team in
Mhm.
these early years that our children need someone there. You're home. I'm working hard. I come home. I believe that you're teaching our children the value system that belongs to both of us, right?
Mhm.
That one of you is there the majority of the time to teach your child that value system, and that you spend as much time as you can with your children to teach them your value system.
Mhm.
So, again, for men, I think it's being conscious. It's like conscious parenting, it's being aware. Do you need to go to that business dinner? Gosh, maybe not. Do I
Right.
need to go on that trip that's going to take me away for 2 or 3 days? I don't really need to do that. I'd much rather. Do I need to go out for drinks on that night with a. No, maybe I could go home and play baseball in the backyard or football in the
Mhm.
backyard with my son. So I think it's about parents being conscious that you have a very short window. Let's say 18 years is the window.
Right.
And if you're going to live till 120 like Moses, like now, but let's say you're going to live till 100,
Yeah.
18 years is pretty short. And if you miss it, you miss it. It's
Oof.
gone.
Mhm.
And so you have plenty of time in your life to be self indulgent,
Mhm.
self focused, to pursue things that are self oriented. You have a lot of years to do that. But
Right.
you have very, very few years to make such an impression on your child that will last. Your legacy is not your career. Your legacy is not your fortune. Your legacy is your children and how
Mm-hmm.
healthy they are
Mm-hmm.
and whether they love you.
Right. Right. Um, what are your thoughts on homeschooling?
I like it in certain circumstances. For instance, if there are no good school alternatives in your area, if schools are dangerous, if your child is neurodivergent or has learning disabilities and that's not being met in the classroom, if your
Mm-hmm.
child is being bullied and is having social issues and there are no other alternative schools, then I would prefer to see them in a pod that you create. I don't like the idea of children being educated alone in isolation in their home, but I like the idea of parents creating pods of 5 or 6 children and parents of a similar belief system and value system, and hire a teacher and have them learn together most of the time and then at home with you some of the time. But homeschooling is a misnomer because it makes it sound like Little House on the Prairie, where your child is
Right.
alone in front of a computer. And that I don't recommend. But I
Okay.
do recommend sometimes that children do better if they're not doing well academically because the school can't meet their needs, or if they're not doing well emotionally because the school can't control or contain a social issue
Mm-hmm.
for your child. That you create a safer environment for them.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So we, do you mind if we just tap on disorders?
That's fine.
How do you feel like as a whole? And I know we could break this down a little bit. What are your thoughts on the impact that the public education system has had on the possible overdiagnosing of disorders? Um, Students have been diagnosed with disorder or categorized as special education on like a
Mhm.
504 plan and IEP, individualized education plan.
So there are really neurodivergent children. There are children with dyslexia and all kinds of learning disabilities, which are very real and organic and inherited, by the way. But there's an overdiagnosis. It has to do with performance. Kids are diagnosed with things so they can have more time on tests. And do I believe that's a good thing? I think there has to be more regulation of it. To be honest, I'm very publicly known to come out against the diagnosis of ADHD because it's not a disorder. It's
Mhm.
actually a stress reaction. It's a reaction to stress. It is the flight part of fight or flight. When the
Mhm.
brain goes into flight, it's attentionally compromised.
Mhm.
So instead of thinking what is going on with these children that they're stressed beyond belief, we're medicating away the symptom. So it would
Mhm.
be like if you came to your internist and said, I have terrible headaches. And the internist found that you had a brain tumor, but they gave you Tylenol and said, go away. Or I'll give you Percocet, take this and it'll make the headaches go away, but doesn't deal with the cancer.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's what we're doing with children. We're not asking the right questions, which is, why are they so stressed? What's going on in the home? What are the psychosocial stressors that are contributing to this child having a stress reaction? And getting to the root of it. We're just silencing their pain.
Mhm.
And we're doing this with anxiety, and we're doing this with depression too. We're medicating children like it's like vitamins, like it's like
Okay.
gummy bears,
Okay.
instead of really sending them to really good therapy. And I think sometimes CBT and DBT is the right thing for teenagers, but mostly it's not for children. They need
Mhm.
play therapy, which is a deeper thinking, feeling, reaching kind of therapy. They need psychodynamic therapy when they're teenagers too, where they can talk about their feelings. If
Mhm.
they can't talk about their feelings, then things like DBT and CBT can be helpful. But the idea that CBT was created to deal with things like OCD symptoms and smoking addiction. I mean, that was the original use for
Wow.
CBT, behavioral therapy, um, obsessive sort of symptoms. And DBT was created for borderline personality disorders. And so they're being thrown like spaghetti against the wall at all children, saying, and insurance companies love them because they're quick and down and dirty, and they don't have to pay very much for them because they're short term and they're concrete. Now, the problem with concrete is concrete doesn't necessarily ever get to the root of anything. Concrete deals with symptoms. So it's not that children don't need some behavioral help when they're dealing with their feelings, but they need to be able to talk about their feelings and the dynamics in their family on a very deep level. And they need people who are really trained to listen to them in that way. So I also don't think a lot of children are getting proper therapy in this country.
Okay. Okay. And I think there's such a known and significant impact of the nutrition on any, we could call it disorder or a reaction or the children's behavior, just say behavior in general. Why aren't we paying more attention to the nutrition that we give young people?
I mean, I think that I think some of it has to do with the inconvenient truth that very poor children don't have choices when it comes to
Of course.
nutrition. Wealthy families do, and poor families do not. I mean, until recently, there were food deserts in poor communities where you couldn't feed your children and you couldn't afford to feed your children well. So, first of all, to feed your children in a healthy manner, or to feed ourselves in a healthy manner, requires money. And right now, money is, gas is $6 a gallon in California. And where I am, it's like $5 a gallon. So, people are struggling. And so I think that nutrition depends on, believe it or not, it depends on wealth. It's very hard to feed your children well if you're buying the cheapest food. I heard a statistic that meat sales have gone down in America since all this is happening, and beans and rice has gone up. Now, there's nothing wrong with beans and rice. It's
Of course.
healthy.
Of course.
But, that tells you what's going on.
To me, it's even I took my niece to tour a school, a private school, a well-known, high-achieving private school, and they had a
Yeah,
cafeteria. And inside the cafeteria, the food options that they had, I mean,
we're
this is a
abysmal.
school. It was horrific, and I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. I thought we were going to get, this grade A, unbelievable nutrition.
Organic milk and organic eggs
Well,
and
to improve,
organic
yeah,
vegetables and like
cognitive,
all the tuition
yeah,
that they're paying. Yeah, no,
improve. I
no,
mean, the tuition was like $50,000 a year, or sixty
no,
thousand dollars.
no. No, it's
No.
expensive to feed a whole school well, and you have to be committed to it. And
Mhm.
so, I think there's just an awakening about. I mean, I know in my children's schools there was sort of an awakening about a decade ago about the importance of, buying organic dairy instead of regular dairy, or avoiding certain foods, if they're not organic. And so this became sort of, not feeding fried foods at lunchtime to kids because of, weight issues. And,
Mhm.
so I think there's sort of an awakening that's happened in America, and people are more health conscious, but I think it just wasn't on people's radars. And
Mhm.
I think still, if you go to the public schools and look at the cafeteria food, what we used to call mystery meat and things that were inedible,
Mhm.
uncooked meats and,
Oh, jeez.
pastas soaked in oil. And I think it's still a thing. I
Mhm.
think health and nutrition is still not on a lot of schools' sort of priority list,
Mhm. Mhm.
sadly, because I think nutrition does matter. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that nutrition can either help or hurt, can either it can exacerbate, other kinds of emotional issues. If you're already an anxious child and you give that child a lot of sugar, I'm sure it's going to make them spin out of control. So, yeah, I mean, I think that podcasts like yours, that you can make people aware of how important nutrition is.
Mhm. Yeah. I remember watching the Jamie Oliver experiment. Do you remember that when he brought all the sugar on stage
Yeah,
and showed how much, kids consume a year? And then
yeah,
he paid for and implemented the program within a school, and the behavioral challenges dropped by like 80%.
yeah.
The grades went up, the cognitive function focus went up, and there was almost no misbehavior or, kids acting out. I mean, it was significant. And I was thinking,
I think what people also don't realize is that processed foods, there's this whole thing about processed foods. Processed foods were sold to America in the 50s and the 60s, saying you don't have to cook. You can just buy frozen food. You can buy canned food.
mm,
You can buy packaged foods where you just add water and stir. And I think what it did is it said that cooking isn't important, that cooking fresh food is not important. And again, so many things were deprioritized. Cooking for me is part of nurturing. And when nurturing went out the window, so did cooking. It's really interesting.
mm,
If you talk to, I just spoke to a group, a mothers group the other day. Hundreds of mothers that believe in nurturing, and all
mhm,
of them were talking about baking bread and buying fresh vegetables, and so it's part of the nurturing kind of path. And I think that when nurturing was demeaned and diminished, so cooking went out with that
okay.
because it took time and it took, we used to say cooking is love. Cooking for your children, cooking for your spouse, cooking for your family is love. You go to Italy, it's still love.
Oh,
Go to
yes.
France, it's still love.
Hmm.
But in America, it's all about processed food, how quick, both parents working, let's come home and make macaroni and cheese out of a box. And, you know, um, that's the problem because to
Hmm.
make really healthy food, you have to know how to cook and you have to get pleasure from the nurturing
Right,
of cooking for your
right.
family.
Absolutely. And I've certainly
Mm,
seen cultures. We have good friends in Italy. When we visited them over there, just the whole experience in itself, it was magical. It was happy. It was
right.
positive. It was by far the best meal I've had, possibly in this lifetime. But it was just the whole experience in itself was just wonderful. And I can't think of anything. I know there's variables in there. We were on vacation and what have you, but it was really special. And you could see the care and the love that went into it. It was extraordinary, extraordinary. I was thinking, Dr. Erica, of do you have a? I listen to so many, audiobooks, and what are the things that are essential to build a wonderful foundation for a young person? And I was thinking sports, but not every kid wants to play sports.
Mm-mm.
I was thinking outdoor activities. I was thinking, get dirty outside. Do you have a bullet list of things that are absolutely essential? And you certainly already have dropped some that are essential to a kid, young person, young child's upbringing that they must experience.
I mean, it's without judgment that I say this, it's based on research, but one of the greatest things you can give your children is some faith. There's a lot of research. There was a study out of Harvard that said that children who are raised in a faith based community of some kind, it doesn't matter what your faith is,
Hmm.
do better in terms of their mental health.
Okay.
Children that experience nature with their families do better in terms of emotional regulation. There's this whole movement towards forest bathing. I mean, you don't need somebody to talk about forest bathing to say that taking a walk in the woods with your kids, or going to the beach and swimming at the beach, or being in nature with your children is very soothing. It's very emotionally regulating.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, those are two things that come to mind.
Hmm. Do you think it's negative for parents to push their kids? Every parent is living vicariously through their kids, and every kid's going to be a professional athlete. Do you think it's
Right.
negative that they push them into these sports?
So, I think sports are very good for children for a number of reasons. I don't think every child is drawn towards sports, but I think for the children who are drawn towards sports, it's very good for them. And the reason is that it helps with it's that playful tactile stimulation. It helps with regulation of aggression. Teamwork helps you, particularly in the middle school years when there's a lot of teasing and bullying. There's something about the camaraderie of being on a team and having a group of people who have your back. It's learning how to be a team and how to work with other people. So I think it's good if a child is drawn towards it. You don't want to force a child to do it. You want to encourage them and you want to expose them to different sports. So often parents come from an orientation, well, I play tennis, so my child's going to play tennis, or I play football, so my child's going to play football. But the truth of the matter is that if you can expose them to soccer and tennis and running and, and see if any, it's a little like throwing spaghetti against the wall, isn't it? Like the Italians do to see if it sticks. That's how you know if it's ready. So you're throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall, but you see if any of it sticks, and then you encourage your child. But if your child wants none of it, then that's okay too. And then you find things that they like to do that are uniquely them. I mean, what is the responsibility of parents is to help children to find their happiness, their joy, their strengths, and to accept their vulnerabilities and to help them to accept their weaknesses. Okay. So if they're not good at sports and they come to you and say, I suck at soccer, it's not for you to say, no, honey, you're great. You were terrific. No, because that just makes you a very unreliable, illegitimate source of information for that. They don't believe you because they know they're not good. Instead say, well, that's okay. Maybe it's not your thing. Maybe there's something else that's your thing, or maybe sports isn't your thing. That's okay too. Right. Maybe we'll try music, or maybe we'll try art. So your job is to help to expose them to different things, to help them to find what their things are. And they don't need to be great at those things. Yeah. You're not seeking excellence. You're seeking joy. Your child may be a terrible painter, but may love taking out paints and painting. Yeah. They may suck at soccer, but they may love playing it. This is not a competition with other parents or a competition with yourself or a competition between your children. You should never compare your children. And so if I took the word competition out and said, your job as a parent is to help your children find their joy.
I love that. Looking ahead, what, changes do you hope to see in social attitudes towards building young people or helping the upbringing of young people? Is there anything specific that you really hope we improve upon quickly?
I mean, I hope that, a lot of modernity has been very good. There's so many things about, modernity that have been good. Medicine and, antibiotics and, polio vaccines and women having choices and being respected in the world for their intelligence. There's so many good things that have happened from modernity. Inside heating. I always am grateful for inside heating, as I live in the Northeast. But there's a lot about it that is not good. And I think that in rejecting nurturing and caregiving and relationships as being a priority in our lives in terms of family or friendships, we've turned away from what's really important and turned towards things that are substitutes like career achievement and materialism and fame. And, I think they did a piece of research and they asked a bunch of teenagers, what is the most important thing that they are seeking in life? And they said fame and money. Oof. None of them said family.
Oh my goodness.
Fame came first. Oof.
Wow.
Instagram famous and then money. So that tells you where our value system is. So if you raise your children because you live by your values, you can't talk about your values. You can't teach them these things by telling them these things. You have to live them. We live our values. We cannot teach them didactically like a history teacher in fifth grade. You have to live those values.
It sounds like any environment. Like you know, do you do what you say and say what you mean?
That's right.
Do you lead by example? You know, when you were talking about they wanted to be famous, rich and famous, is that what you said?
They want to be famous and rich. Famous first, rich next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the famous thing in the social media, I remember this happened a few years ago. Um, I'm in our facility and I see a young person walk in, 20 something, who's very popular in social media. They walk over to an exercise, they film the exercise, and they leave.
Yeah.
And then the next day they come in, they do the same thing. And I got their attention. I said, "What do you do for your training? Do you do a lot?" And he said, "Well, I just film an exercise and I put it up on social media." And I was thinking, "Oh my God, he didn't train. He just filmed one exercise and he put it up." And then I immediately, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. He's not interested in, and I know we all have a very different definition of success. That person's not goal is not to be successful as a whole. They just want to appear to be successful.
Yeah.
And it was shocking for me because within my journey, in my path, I got way more out of the journey in the buildup, in what I learned about myself in the process. By the way, I didn't like it. I didn't like a lot of it, but it made me who I am today, and I think I'm better for it. But
Yeah.
there, people are completely skipping that whole part of the journey, which is
Yeah.
very, very, it's harmful, I believe. You know,
Well, they're skipping the journey.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
actually
yeah,
skipping the journey.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I, I'm like, they're missing the best part. I can understand why they perceive it to be the hardest part, but that truly is the best part. You know,
Yeah.
um, certainly, I don't think I would have been able to educate that person, but it was a very interesting experience. Dr. Komisar, I cannot thank you enough for your time. You spent a lot of time with us. You really did a great job of informing us. Can you please tell us a little bit about your books and where we can find you?
So I have 3 books out now, as you said, one on 0 to 3, one on adolescence, and one on divorce. The one on divorce has 2 titles because the title in America is Parents Guide to Divorce, and the title in the UK and Australia, when they license a book, Penguin changed the title to The Child Healthy Divorce. So, and you can find those on my website, www.komisar, KOMISAR.com, or you can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Any of the online bookstores have my books. But also you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter and on my website, make an appointment with me or find all kinds of things that I've written other than my books. So
You're a wealth of knowledge, and I really can't thank you enough for spending time with us and educating us. It was incredibly helpful, and I know it's going to be incredibly helpful for all of the listeners. So thank you very much.
thank you for having me.
Thank you.